Hello everyone, and welcome to week 2 of English 120. I hope by now you're all feeling pretty orientated in our online environment. This week we're going to be talking about academic writing, and we're going to talk about 2 texts and have conversations about them based on your active reading. You're going to read The Law of Life, a short story by Jack London. You can find it in your portable Jack London reader on page 26. There's also a link to a text here for those of you who have had any trouble getting your books from the bookstore. Also, we're going to be reading To Build a Fire. There's a link to the text here as well. The assignments for this week are, you're going to join a conversation about To Build a Fire, and then you're going to write a reflection journal on the Law of Life, and you're also going to complete understanding research, which is due by Wednesday at 11:59 p.m. You do have an extra day on your comp class lessons. Hopefully that won't be too confusing for you guys. Additionally, there will be one more assignment where I'm going to ask you to upload photos of your active reading. If you do not have the ability to upload photos, if you don't have a camera that takes a phone that takes photographs, you can stop by my office hours anytime that I'm here and show me your active reading. The reason why is you will be graded on how well you're doing active reading in this class, and I want to make sure you guys all know how to do it. So please make sure that you do upload a photograph. There will be an assignment under this week's information, so please make sure you do that. Alright, before we start talking about the text though, I want to talk to you about the academic writing process. This is how you're going to go about writing in this class for anything you write for this class, especially a formal essay. The first step is to generate ideas, then you'll go into planning, drafting, and developing your paper, and then you'll revise and edit, and that cycle can continually recycle. The writing process begins with pre-writing. You're going to use pre-writing to generate ideas. The first thing you're going to do when you get your assignment, and you are going to get an assignment beginning next week, is you're going to review your assignment to understand what you need to accomplish with your writing. Then you're going to choose your pre-writing technique. Oftentimes you're going to want to do more than one type of pre-writing to generate ideas through pre-writing techniques. The first one is called brainstorming. That's where you use free association to stimulate a chain of ideas, often to personalize a topic or break it down. You want to do this alone or with a group of friends. It's a good way to just kind of unpack everything you know about a topic. Another way to do it is free writing, and that's when you tap into your unconscious by writing continuously without lifting your pen, pencil from the page, or without stopping typing for a specific amount of time. How do you do it? You start with a sentence at the top of the page, then you write without stopping for at least 10 minutes. Don't censor yourself. Feel free to let your mind wander. If you get stuck, ask yourself questions such as what interests you about the topic, what do you care most about, what do you know about it that the next person doesn't, what have you read about this topic, observed or heard about, how might you feel about this topic if you were someone else. Then just keep repeating this process, looping back to expand a good idea if you wish. We're going to have an opportunity to try out these pre-writing techniques next week, so please make sure you pay attention and download these slides so you have them to access. Another, for you more visually inclined, another way to do pre-writing is to doodle or sketch. If you think visually, you might want to take out a blank piece of paper and try doodling or sketching your way to a paper topic. Begin with a key visual at the center of the top of the page, and then add sketches or doodles as they occur to you to embellish, expand, define, or redirect your topic. Another way, also for people that think visually, is mapping. You can do so with, you can mind map with post-it notes or with actual mind mapping software. It's called cloud software. You're going to start with a topic at the middle of the page. You just put a post-it note on it, or just put a bubble in the middle of the page and write, say you wanted to write about the Yukon, right? We're going to read 2 stories that are set in the Yukon this week. So maybe you get really excited about the Yukon and you want to write about the Yukon. You're going to start with the topic in the middle, and then you're going to use sticky notes or just or software to create bubbles off of that. Well, what are 5 different topics related to the Yukon? Maybe the history of the Yukon, maybe the gold rush, maybe the native people who live in the Yukon area, maybe the Yukon in modern day, right? These would all be different topics, and then you can dig deeper into each of those topics. Another way you can do pre-writing is to generate ideas is to ask reporters questions. So you can ask who, what, where, when, why, or how. There's an example of how you can really dig into the Kennedy assassination by asking these types of questions over on the right-hand side of the slide. So go ahead and look at it. This is a technique that you're interested in trying. Once you've discovered you've generated some ideas, then you really want to discover material. You're going to shape and support your ideas. You're going to need evidence to facts, figures, reports, opinions, or examples to really help you support or understand the topic that you're looking into. You find evidence through your own experience and knowledge, through your research. Don't worry, we're going to be doing a lot of this over the course of the semester. And when you do your research, you want to find materials that draw you to new approaches and to think critically about all of these sources. So you don't want to just look for sources that agree with what you're thinking. You actually want to find all different opinions, because you're going to be joining a conversation about this topic. As you'll learn when you do your comp class this week, research is really a conversation. So whenever I write an article about Jack London, I'm joining a conversation with all the Jack London scholars who have come before me, and I want to know what they're saying already before I join that conversation. So once you've generated ideas, it's time to plan, draft, and develop. So you want to, after you have you've done your pre-writing, you have an idea of what you possibly want to talk about, then you want to identify your purpose and audience. You want to decide on one main point. You want to state a thesis, and then organize your ideas by grouping or outlining. Then you'll start drafting. You'll start, you'll restart, you'll build paragraphs, you'll figure out how to open and how to conclude, and then you'll really make sure you create coherence in your draft so that the reader can really follow what you're saying. Then you'll go back to that draft and develop it by explaining and supporting the points that you're making, or by adding in definitions or examples and details to support. Also supplying evidence such as facts, statistics, and expert testimony and observations can really help you write a successful paper. So one of the first things you want to do when you're developing your paper is, after you've identified your purpose and your audience, you're going to decide on one main point that you want to make. And you're going to do so by stating a thesis. And then you'll organize your ideas of how you're going to prove that thesis based on what will be the best way to really organize it. So hopefully your pre-writing helped you discover a topic or an idea you'd like to write about. If not, you want to go back and do some more pre-writing. Once you've found an idea, you want to test various ways of stating it, given your purpose, why you are writing, and your audience, who you're writing to. So for example, if you were writing a thesis and your idea is that parking in the morning before class is annoying, right? That could become campus parking is a big problem, right? So instead of just stating your opinion about something, you're stating it in a way that it actually means something to other people. Next, you want to arrange your ideas and material in a sensible order that will clarify your point. One way of doing this would be to create an outline or to analyze the main point by breaking it down into parts. A thesis is a main point of your essay and your slant, or the reason why you're writing about this topic. If you don't discover a solid thesis while you're planning, don't worry. You'll have more time to perfect your thesis while you develop your draft. So, for example, you could change that previous thesis, campus parking is a big problem, to be much more specific by saying, parking on campus is a problem for students because of the long lines, inefficient entrances, and poorly marked spaces. Once you have a good, solid thesis, and we will talk about that more, guys, then you want to draft and develop. So the next step, after you have a plan, like your thesis, the main purpose and audience you're writing to, what you're going to write about and why, basically, then you want to write. Don't be afraid to take risks at this stage. So let yourself write without being too contained, right? This is where the magic of writing can happen. But you also don't want to get discouraged if you're writing, you don't want to get discouraged if your writing isn't perfect in your first draft. It's not meant to be. You are supposed to go through many drafts when you're writing. When I write an essay, it goes through many, many drafts. Writing takes drafts, and if you're doing it otherwise, chances are you aren't writing to your full potential. So once when you draft an essay, it really wants to be in this format. This is how I expect you to draft essays for this class. You want to write an introduction where you're going to introduce the topic that you're talking about, and then you're going to state the thesis that you have for your paper. Then you're going to write several body paragraphs where you develop subtopics to prove your thesis. Each body paragraph should clearly cover a subtopic and relate the subtopic back to your thesis. Each subtopic is supported with ample evidence. Those are going to be the sources that you find when you're reviewing the conversation that you're joining. Then you're going to write a conclusion. How have you proven your thesis? What has the reader gained by reading your paper? How does your paper relate to a larger purpose? All right, that's the academic writing overview. And I want you guys to just take that in and really think about how, what that means. You're going to be coming back to that next week as we write our first essay. This week, we're focusing more on active reading. This is preparing you for writing about these texts. Now, when I say active reading, I mean I want you to write all over your text. I've uploaded the active reading checklist, so you have a copy. I highly recommend downloading it so you have it available. When you read, before you even begin reading The Law of Life, I want you to think about what is the title. So what do you think the law of life means? Maybe you think, okay, well, it's got the word law in it, so maybe it has to do with some sort of regulation. It's got the word life, so maybe it's about how people are living, right? Start writing that down. Don't just do it in your head. Start writing that down on the actual book where you're reading. You're going to be showing the evidence that you're actively writing in your books. Then you're going to say, you're going to look at who wrote the text. So for this text, we know that it was written by Jack London. And you've read a little bit about Jack London, right? So you can use the information that you read about last week about who Jack London is, what kind of writer he was, when he lived, right? So that you can really think about what that means in regards to this story. We do know that this is a short story, as is the other story you're going to be reading. And it's fiction. That means it's not true, though it is based on some tales that Jack London heard while he was in the Yukon. That what Clarice Stays in her article refers to as the metaphorical gold, right? That he encountered while he was up there. He would sit down at the bars and buy some of the old-timers drinks and just listen to their stories. And that's how he got all of these wonderful stories that he came back from the Klondike and wrote about. This short story, was first published in McClure's magazine in March of 1900. So while you're reading this text, this is something you should write down at the beginning before you begin reading. Then while you're reading, there's going to be words in this story that you don't know, and I want you to look them up. There's a link here to the Oxford English Dictionary that we have access to. Please use this dictionary to look up the words. There are many words in these texts that you will not be able to find in dictionary.com. And as you can see here, when you're accessing Oxford English Dictionary, you can access it using Napa Valley College as the password and as the username. You want to, just like last time, I want you to mark words or passages that make you think about things you've already read and explain how you think they relate to one another. I want you to mark words or passages that bring to mind personal experiences and write these personal experiences down. Mark passages that you agree with or disagree with and state why you agree or disagree with the passage. Mark difficult passages so that you can come back to them. Mark passages you really like star them or underline them, and then write down why you really like them. Maybe you really like the way he describes nature when you're reading this. So write that down, okay? Mark parts of the text that highlight the main theme of the text and explain how you think these passages do so. For example, the last line of this short story talks about the law of life. If he's named the story The Law of Life, and it's the last sentence in the story, that's probably important. So highlight that. But figure out, what do you think the law of life is he's trying to say, right? If at any time you get lost while you're reading, just stop and write down, summarize what's been said before. Then as you're going, ask questions. Ask me questions. Ask Jack London questions. Ask yourself questions. Ask the character in the story questions. This will be very effective in To Build a Fire, where he makes some really bad decisions and you want to talk to him and say, no, don't do that, right? This is where you can do that, all right? After you actively read it, there will be a spot under this week's content for you to upload a photo of the text with your writing all over it. As I said earlier, if you don't have access to a photo that you can upload, feel free to stop by my office hours and bring your text with you so that I can check off that you've done active reading. You're going to do the same active reading of To Build a Fire by Jack London. Again, look at the title, look at what that tells you about the text, look at who wrote it. Also, I want you to look up when this was written. If you have your edition, the Portable Jack London, it's very easy to find out. It's in the title when it was published. So please make sure you put some effort into that. Then go through and while you're reading, do the same thing. Write all over your text. Ask questions. Really think about what's going on in this text. All right, after you've done that, I'd like you to complete, the first assignment is a reflective journal. I'd like you to, after you've actively read The Law of Life, you're going to answer the following questions, all of these questions, in a post that's at least 250 words. I want you to use evidence from the text, which are quotations from the text, to support what you're saying. So who is Kosh Kush? Who was he before he found himself alone in the snow with a small pile of firewood? Where does the story take place, and how do you know? What is the tradition Kosh Kush is continuing by staying? And what do you think is the law of life? How is Kosh Kush's life shaped by heredity and environment, over which he has no control and about which he can exercise little, if any, choice? How is Kosh Kush's experience with fire different from the man in To Build a Fire? Your journal entry is due by Tuesday at 11:59 p.m. You must turn your post in on time to receive full credit. Please make sure you use spell check and you edit your response before you post it. We're also going to have a discussion forum this week, and our discussion forum is going to be about To Build a Fire. So after you've actively read To Build a Fire, choose one of the following topics below to discuss with your peers. Please post an in-depth post with as much information as possible. All questions must be answered by the class as a whole. So if you see that there's a question that hasn't been answered yet, please go ahead and answer that question. There's only 4 questions, and there are 25 people in this class, so there's plenty of repeats that can happen, but all 4 questions must be answered by the class. The first question is, I'd like you to research the area where the man in To Build a Fire was traveling. Where was the Alaska Gold Rush? When was it? Try to identify on a map where the man traveled. Explain all of this information to your classmates using text and visual images. Or you can research survival strategies in extreme cold weather. What type of food should be consumed? What are some techniques for finding shelter? Explain all of this information to your classmates using text and visual images. Research diseases and afflictions such as scurvy and frostbite of the early gold rush pioneers in the Klondike. What were the causes? How were they treated? What would be modern methods of prevention and treatment? Explain all this information to your classmates using text and visual images. Research the equipment and or clothing that people would have worn in the 1890s for going to the Yukon. What were some of the limitations of the gear, the clothing? How has modern cold weather clothing changed? Explain all this information to your classmates using text and visual images. So you're going to post your initial post answering one of these bullets by Saturday at 11:59 p.m. Then you're going to respond to at least 3 of your peers' posts by Tuesday at 11:59 p.m. When you respond to your peers' posts, though, you need to respond referring back to the story. So if they're giving you information about the survival gear, mention in the story when they talk about the survival gear, I mean the clothing that that the man was wearing in the text, and give page numbers. So please make sure when you respond to your peers' post, you don't just say, hey, good job doing your research, right? You really want to get in there. I want you guys to have a really in-depth conversation that really uses this information you've gained from your classmates to really expand on what you know about the story. Finally, you're going to be doing your second research lesson and then research quiz in comp class. It's called Understanding Research. It's due by next Wednesday at 11:59 p.m. All right, that's it for this week, guys. Really spend time reading those stories. You're doing a great job so far. This is week 2. We're getting into it. Please, as always, stop by my office if you have any questions, and I look forward to seeing you online.